Good morning, and thanks for joining us. Mr. Abbate is the Deputy Director of the FBI, which is a nearly all-encompassing job, running the day-to-day operations of the Bureau, supervising the special agents in charge of 56 field offices. The FBI, during the time I worked there, Paul, was what you'd expect it to be. The case was the boss. Politics didn't exist. And yet, in the last decade, the FBI has been batted around a lot and come back unbowed, but a little battered. All that with its portfolio expanding. Could you take us through, in a few minutes, what is the state of the FBI today?
Thank you, John. It's great to be with you here this morning. The state of the FBI is strong. As you noted, we're battle-tested as an organization over 100 plus years now, and particularly in recent times. And I see it, I have a frontline view of that every day. We take a very rigorous, disciplined approach to the work, much like when you were there. We still get together each and every morning and brief the director of the FBI and all the work that's going on around the Bureau and in partnership, importantly, with others, both in the United States and around the world. And I'm proud of the work that the Bureau does each and every day to protect people and to defend our great country and contribute to the defense of other countries and allies like Qatar, where we sit today. We get the entirety of the FBI leadership in the room, again, every morning. Counterterrorism, counterintelligence, cyber, weapons of mass destruction, the traditional criminal programs that form the foundation of the FBI, and then the business aspects of the Bureau as well. And we go through everything. And what I see each and every day is the strength of the organization on display, reflected in the work of the great people that form the Bureau. Not a day goes by where we're not informed about a potential act of terrorism that's been disrupted, or a spy that's been captured or outed, a cyber attack that's been prevented, a child who's been recovered on the criminal side, a politician held accountable for corrupt acts that they've committed in their offices or the roles that they occupy. That's every day, preventing violent crime, taking down organized crime. And that's what we've been doing for over 100 years. That's what we continue to do. We do that objectively, based on the facts. We do it rigorously and thoroughly. And again, I'm really proud of what we do. It's a vast portfolio, of course, taking that on. There's huge challenges in that, but we work hard to do that efficiently, prioritizing ruthlessly each and every day to drive the mission. And importantly, all of that is based in the partnerships. We cannot do it alone, whether it's state, local, tribal, territorial law enforcement in the United States or around the world, or the intelligence and security services who we partner with, international partners. That's what it takes collaboratively to get this done. And I think we've really, all of us have recognized that and really stepped it up in that regard. It's put us in a better place today, again, to prevent harm, to keep our country safe.
Yet the FBI hasn't gotten any bigger. When you look at just what you framed here, which in any other organization would be a remarkable day to have any of those cases. We're in the FBI, that's every day. The great power competition, which was just discussed on this stage by a number of people, including our colleague from Singapore, who talked about, this sweeping battle for global power, and that number one spot, Russia, China, and then, in the shadows, North Korea, Iran. That's counter-espionage, that's cyber spying, that's a giant portfolio, especially with hostile foreign powers like China and Russia, where there are massive components built into trying to steal secrets, trying to recruit people, not just political, military, intelligence, but also trade secrets and economics. If you combine that with cyber, and then you throw in the global issue of counterterrorism, oh yeah, and then there is that old thing, crime in America. The FBI can do anything. I believe that from having seen it rise up to these occasions, but can it do everything?
We certainly can't do everything, and it gets back to what we talked about the first question. We have a vast portfolio. I think we've proven time and again that we're up to taking that on, and it has expanded over time. But we do have certain singular focuses, when it comes to counterterrorism, counterespionage, cyber, national security. That's something that we own. It's no fail, and then there's a vast array of other things that we do as well. All of it's partnered. That's the bottom line. And I think that's really when we've seen the growth within each of these programs. As you noted, the way we've kept up with the pace of all of that is through the partnerships. And I could go on and on with examples of how that's been brought to bear. Cyber, for instance, we had a recent takedown disruption on the Lockbit ransomware as a service thing. And, that was a collaborative effort by probably a dozen countries around the world, together with partners within U.S. government, to go after the things that we do in that realm, go after the bad actors, seize their money, and then when it comes to cyber now, take down, disrupt the technical infrastructure. Again, global in nature. So that is a really outstanding example, a recent one just within this year, where we were able to get together with partners that one probably would never have imagined before, and do it in a way, an integrated way, with more partners than ever before, to have this very effective disruption within the cyber criminal realm.
So working with, partners is second nature to the FBI in the new world, but you said something interesting, partners you couldn't imagine. Shared threat sometimes translates to shared interest. What kind of partners were you working with in the cyber realm that would surprise people?
Well, we have now, what we've added within our international operations division is the cyber ALATs. We're working with, traditionally we've worked very closely with the Five Eye partners. Everyone knows that. But again...
just for the audience, define ALATs.
The ALAT is we have the legal attaché offices, which are within the U.S. embassies and consulates around the world. We're in, I think, nearly 90 countries now where we have agents and analysts embedded in these positions, and they cover about 180 countries around the world in terms of who they're working with within the variety of countries. And just to name a few, Romania might be a country who we've partnered with closely on cyber that you might not have heard, in the not too distant past. But there's many, many others. I hate to even try to single partners out here. And we've grown that program substantially, going way back now. It's larger than ever. And again, the cyber expertise that's been being brought to bear through the agents in these very specific ALAT positions, which we've strategically positioned in countries that have a close cyber nexus in terms of the threats we're facing, has been hugely important in advancing that work and meeting the needs of the United States, but also helping those other countries far beyond what we've done in the past.
Ransomware, which is a cyber attack that locks organizations, particularly companies, in some cases hospitals, out of access to their own data in return for a demand for money, often very significant money, has been growing to target critical infrastructure, whether it was transportation or energy or food supply. And one of the things we learn is that while the ransomware numbers have been climbing over the years, only 40% of the victims actually pay, but 80% of the victims who pay are struck again, probably because in the dark part of the web where people talk about their crimes, these are people who are known to be people who paid. How do you tackle something that large and sweeping? And some of these successes, you've been actually able to lock the criminals out of their own machinery and develop decryption keys for their victims. This is a level of sophistication we have not seen before on the part of law enforcement, catching up to the technology of bad guys?
Yeah, the technical aspects of the cyber work is something that we really focused on. It takes having the right people with the right expertise, the skills and experience to do that. And it's really important in terms of countering that threat.
How do you get them and retain them? Since the industry would pay double or triple.
It's a challenge. This has been talked about in the past, recruiting and retaining cyber and technical talent. I think one thing we have in the FBI, and it's not just the FBI, it's those agencies and departments that do the type of work that we do, work that has a purpose, that's mission driven in terms of keeping people safe and protecting people. That's the thing for people who want to do it. It's not about the money. It's not why we're in this type of work. When we look at the numbers, though it is sometimes talked about, our attrition rate still remains very, very low across the board in all roles in the FBI, agents, analysts, and that includes the technical and the cyber positions. So we are working hard to get people with that type of background and expertise into the Bureau. We're having good success with that because I think the mission with the purpose draws them in, and we're retaining people as well. It's reflected in the work. So I mentioned Lockbit already, but if you look at the Hive ransomware disruption, that's another recent one where we're really proud of the work that was done there by people in the FBI and partners as well, because in that case, our agents in partnership with others in other countries were able to covertly get into the servers of the malicious cyber actors unbeknownst to them, and then operate in that ecosystem for many, many months and actually recover decryption keys, as you noted, disrupt the activities they were trying to carry out. We were able to share those decryption keys with victims, allowing them to unlock their systems and save hundreds of millions of dollars and prevent millions of dollars of losses going forward. And then at the right time, at the time of our choosing, we were able to take the whole thing down once again through a series of arrests, money, cryptocurrency seizures, and technical disruptions within the server framework that they had architected for that.
The thinking on these cases, as always in the United States, well, this is going to be hard. We'll never get prosecutions. These people are overseas or out of reach or hard to identify. What's the reality there?
The reality is that in many instances that is true, but we see value on both sides of that. We think that there is a strong demonstrated deterrent effect in still bringing criminal charges, leveraging the traditional law enforcement tools. We're doing that on balance with other things that are not in public view and that are covert in nature and that happen behind the scenes. It's sort of like leveraging all of the tools and options that are available to us to have the greatest impact and effect on the bad guys. Essentially, having criminal charges does two things. In some instances, though it's more limited, I would say in the cyber realm, we are able to work with allies when individuals are in countries where we have treaties or agreements and actually get them taken into custody and extradited and bring them back for prosecution in the United States. In other instances, we view it as locking them down. It's calling them out, naming them, putting them in public view, that certainly has an effect we've seen behind the scenes on inhibiting further bad activity on their part. It also prevents their travel. I mean, many of them who we charged are now stuck in Russia, for example. They can't travel anymore, and that doesn't always stop them in its entirety, but it does put great limitations on what they might otherwise be able to do in terms of causing harm.
And certainly increases their risk if they try to go anywhere. So you can't talk about global security without talking about cyber. It actually touches all the other crime components, including terrorism. But let's pivot to terrorism and talk about a couple of things, starting with what have you seen since October 7th in terms of change in the atmosphere and in the threat stream?
I think when we use that tragic date as a marker, I would say we were already in a very severe threat environment in terms of what we were seeing. The large-scale terrorist organizations, historic in nature, like Al-Qaeda and ISIS, were continuing to persist in their intent to, strike the U.S. and allies, both at home and around the world. That was ongoing. We have the homegrown violent extremist effect, those who are not directly connected to those organizations but draw inspiration from them with the intent to commit violent acts. That's probably really the greatest threat in the U.S. homeland that we faced in recent years. Our case portfolio, I think the numbers tell the story. We've got nearly 4,000 open and active international terrorism investigations for the Bureau portfolio, and about 3,000 domestic terrorism investigations. It's a lot of cases, and it's on par with what we've seen historically. When you look at the number of arrests and disruptions that we've done just in international terrorism over about the last 5 to 6 years, on average, I would say that we've had about one per week, which I think most people would be struck by, because it's stuff that often flies under the radar, doesn't get a lot of attention, but that's the reality of what we're faced with leading up to October 7th. And certainly since that time, the threat environment has spiked to an even greater degree in terms of the number of acts that are being reported to us, complaints regarding actual violence or threats of violence that are driven by foreign terrorist organization, violent extremist ideology. So it definitely has had an effect on worsening an already very severe terrorism environment.
One of the fascinating things to me, and I know Rebecca Weiner from NYPD, Intel, and Counterterrorism here, I know Christine Abbate is here from the NCTC, is the October 7th attack involved small arms, simple tactics, some flash and dash with things like people coming in on hang gliders, but basically it was planned without anything terribly exotic as a component. And what was fascinating in some of the reporting was that domestic terrorist groups in the United States, in their chat rooms and in their discussions, were immediate to say, look at the tactics, the training and procedures used in this attack. We could adopt and adapt lots of those to our own purpose. One thing it reaffirms is something we probably all knew, which is they watch each other's stuff regardless of ideology. But what does that signal to you?
Well, I think that's nothing new. I mean, it's a trend we've seen in recent years with the, rather than imagining the large-scale attack as we've seen historically, turning to, as you noted, simple means. It could be a vehicle or a knife or even a firearm. Recognizing that it's easier to do that type of things, it's easier to conceal, it's easier to hide leading up to a potential attack, particularly with the lone actors, the lone offenders, the the HVEs. So,
But
it's
this
nothing
wasn't
new.
about lone offenders. This was about scale. Do you,
I think when you look at October 7th and the follow-on from that, as you said, the kind of the talk that's out there, I think it reinforces the need for an approach for us to take together where we're thinking creatively, thinking ahead, imagining the otherwise unimaginable. What are the possibilities? It's learning from history and applying those lessons, because we've seen that cycle repeat itself before, and sadly, in that instance, it happened once again. No one saw that coming, in the immense harm and tragedy that ensued, and that's what we work hard to prevent and stay ahead of every day. So I think it just shows that we've got to stay open-minded, we've got to stay focused and disciplined, and we've got to think about those things that we might not otherwise think about and work to get ahead of that.
when you think of what we referred to as the war on terror, the fact that it went on for a couple of decades, how it degraded Al-Qaeda as an organization. I mean, Al-Qaeda today relies on its reputation as a network that has franchised other organizations in other countries more than in the sense that it is actually the central command of anything. And the degrading of ISIS and its capabilities was marked. But do you think that October 7th, or even before October 7th, the recreation of sanctuary in places like Afghanistan, time to regroup for ISIS, has given them a second act that we are starting to see come to fruition with the Moscow attacks, even the Iran attack, October 7th, for momentum?
I think it's something that we are and we have to stay focused on.
Would you say ISIS is back?
I would say that it never went away. And I would say that the same is true of Al-Qaeda. You know, they've been, though they've suffered significant losses and setbacks, they've been resilient to an extent, and they've persisted in their intent to attack us and cause harm. I mean, that's the bottom line. That was true before October 7th, and it's certainly true after, and we can never forget that. I think avoiding complacency in this regard is something, we've continued to sound the alarm about. We have to continue to operate, again, with discipline and with urgency each and every day, because even with all the setbacks that may have been suffered, there are still, it may be less, and certainly some of the leadership is gone, but there are still committed individuals out there who form those groups who want to do harm, and it only takes one to get through for those consequences to happen.
One of the things that is the oxygen that feeds the fire of terrorism is propaganda, properly produced, sophistication and delivery, but it also needs to have a clarion call to it. And when you look at what is going on in Gaza now, when you watch the mounting body count, when you see the propaganda that's being pumped out about it, but beyond the propaganda, even the straight news stories that talk about the conditions, the suffering, the civilian casualties, the collateral damage, it is a font of propaganda. It feels urgent, it feels compelling. Do you believe that that will be a driver in the terrorism that we may see in the future, in the near future?
I think it's it will certainly add to it. There were many drivers already out there, and certainly that has been spiked through social media, and I think this will add to it in part going forward. It's something that we have to keep our eye on, and I think when we look at what has happened post October 7th, as I've already noted, we've seen a significant spike in terms of violent threats related to that, compelling individuals who may already have been motivated by, again, violent extremist ideologies. As you said, it just adds more fuel to the fire, and I think it will be a persistent problem.
One of the things that has become daily fodder, also rolled up in politics, so maybe you can kind of separate the politics from the reality, is the border. For years, people have been saying the vulnerability at the border is it's too porous, too many people are coming across, it could be a funnel of terrorists. What is the reality there? Is it a concern? If so, how much?
Look, it's always been a risk, people with bad intent entering our country, the unknowns. I think, what's shifted in recent times, the volume does play a role in this. And we've certainly seen instances where terrorists, spies, criminal organizations like the drug cartels, individuals like that have made their way through. I mean, that's a documented fact. We're not as concerned with those that we've identified and know about because we can focus our resources in those areas and work to be preventative or hold them accountable, bring them to justice. When you look at numbers, it's more so the unknowns. What's out there that's managed to get through that we don't even know about or haven't had a chance to vet. So I think the risk in that regard in terms of volume is escalated significantly in recent times.
In recent testimony, the director of the FBI, Chris Wray, has referred to investigations involving smuggling rings that also have connections to ISIS, and the Bureau's efforts to determine whether they were just smuggling rings with connections to ISIS or whether they were smuggling humans into the United States for ISIS.
Definitely something that we're concerned about. The crossover between the various threats and the people involved in that is real. The ability of one terrorist to leverage what might otherwise be a criminal smuggling group is a risk in itself, and certainly something that we're concerned about. So yes, as the director noted, when we saw that, that's something that we've been working hard on to sort out, what is traditional criminal type stuff, which is still a problem. It's still something that we're working to go after, we're working to prevent that, we're working to bring those to justice who are involved in ordinary criminal activity, but we're also looking deeper within that to see whether there are terrorist spies or others who are attempting to leverage that for purposes that could cause potentially greater harm.
So just to close, I would like to get your vision on, we've already talked about partnerships. We talked about the Commonwealth countries, Great Britain, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the United States, and so on. But this conference is probably ground zero at the broader partnership that's required and that seems to be expanding in a good way by the day. Where do you see partnerships going in this global threat environment that you've so clearly described here today internationally?
I think, look, as we've already said, in order to most effectively meet the threat, the partnerships are everything. We all have limited resources, so working together is the best way, in our view, to stay ahead of things, particularly those things that we may not even see coming at this point. It goes back to, for us, working with partners, adhering to and staying focused on executing the basics and the fundamentals well. That means operating with urgency, working our asses off 24/7, being rigorous and thorough and objective in the work that we do, and then reaching out more. We've got, as we noted up front, a lot of well-formed historical partnerships that are vast, but we're always looking for we're always looking to build upon and build greater trust with our existing partners. And I think we're in a very good place in that regard, but we're always looking for new partners as well to reach out into areas that we haven't touched before. And certainly the cyber threat has forced that to a large extent, but we've got to continue to do that and continue to move beyond to that. And we've got to stay focused on keeping ahead. That's the bottom line each and every day.
Well, for partnerships, you're in the right room. Let's thank Paul Abbate, Deputy Director, FBI.